When I first set my eyes on the 10-acre plot of land nestled on Willow Ridge, it felt like destiny. This was more than just a piece of property. It was a dream come true. For years, I had lived in cramped apartments surrounded by honking cars, noisy neighbors, and endless concrete. The idea of escaping all that chaos to live somewhere quiet and peaceful consumed me. And there it was, rolling hills covered with wildflowers, towering oak trees swaying gently in the breeze, and a small stream running along the edge of the woods. It was perfect. I worked hard to save up for this place, scrimping and sacrificing every penny I could. When I finally signed the papers and got the keys, I felt unstoppable. Every morning, I woke up to birds chirping instead of car alarms blaring. At night, the stars stretched across the sky without the glow of city lights drowning them out. It was everything I ever wanted, a personal sanctuary where I could breathe easy and feel alive. But one crisp autumn morning, everything changed. As I stepped out of my trailer sipping a cup of coffee, I noticed something unusual lying near the door. An envelope, plain white with no return address, sat propped against the wooden frame. Across the front were the words asterisk asterisk, URGENT HOA Tales. Asterisk asterisk written in bold black ink. My stomach dropped as I picked it up. Something about it didn't sit right. Inside was a letter from an organization called the Willow Ridge Homeowners Association, HOA. I'd never heard of them before, but apparently they claimed my land fell under their control. According to the letter, I owed $500 annually for community maintenance. If I failed to pay, they warned me of serious consequences, fines, legal action, and even the possibility of losing my land altogether. My hands trembled as I read those words. Losing my land? That couldn't be real. I hadn't joined any HOA when I bought this property. In fact, I thought HOAs only existed in fancy suburban neighborhoods with manicured lawns and swimming pools, not out here in the middle of nowhere. Confusion washed over me. How could someone demand money from me for something I never agreed to? The letter listed a date and time for their next meeting, urging me to attend if I had questions. Reluctantly, I decided to go. Maybe it was some kind of mistake. Perhaps they mixed up my address or confused me with another homeowner. Whatever it was, I figured showing up would clear things up quickly. On the day of the meeting, I drove down to the community center, which turned out to be an old barn converted into a gathering space. Walking inside, I immediately felt out of place. Everyone else looked polished. Pressed shirts, shiny shoes, expensive watches. Meanwhile, I stood awkwardly in my dusty boots and flannel shirt, feeling like an intruder in my own neighborhood. Patricia Langley, the woman who introduced herself as the HOA president, greeted me with a tight smile. Her demeanor was polite but distant, almost rehearsed. When it was my turn to speak, I tried explaining my situation. "I'm not part of your HOA," I said firmly. "I didn't sign anything, and I don't owe you anything." Instead of backing down, Patricia pulled out a map and pointed to my property. "Your land is clearly within our boundaries," she explained matter-of-factly. Then came the bombshell. According to her, everyone living in Willow Ridge was automatically considered a member unless they formally opted out during the initial purchase process, a step I had unknowingly skipped. My heart sank. This wasn't supposed to happen. This was supposed to be asterisk my asterisk land, asterisk my asterisk refuge. But now, it seemed like I wasn't as free as I thought. The meeting at the barn felt surreal, like stepping into a world I didn't belong to. Everyone around me seemed so polished, so confident, while I stood there clutching the letter in my hand, feeling more out of place with each passing second. The air smelled faintly of fresh paint and coffee, but it did little to calm my nerves. Patricia Langley, the HOA president, sat at the head of the room, her posture stiff and commanding. She had an aura about her, calm on the surface but sharp underneath, like the edge of a knife. When it was finally my turn to speak, I took a deep breath and stepped forward. "I'm not part of your HOA," I began, trying to sound firm despite the knot tightening in my stomach. I never signed up for this, and I don't owe you anything." Patricia's lips twitched into what might have been a smile, or maybe just a reflex. Without missing a beat, she reached under the table and pulled out a large map. Unrolling it across the podium, she pointed to a section shaded in light blue. My heart sank as I saw it. There was my property, clearly marked within the boundaries of Willow Ridge. "According to our records," she said smoothly, her voice dripping with authority, "all landowners here are automatically members of the HOA unless they formally opt out during the purchase process." She paused, letting that sink in before adding, "And unfortunately, Mr." She glanced down at her notes. "Mr. Carter, you missed that deadline." Her words hit me like a punch to the chest. Automatically a member. What did that even mean? I remembered signing stacks of papers when I bought the land. Pages upon pages of fine print and legal jargon. Who reads all of that? Certainly not me. At the time, I trusted the real estate agent, assumed everything was above board. Now, standing here, I realized how naive I'd been. I tried reasoning with her. "Look, I didn't know about this HOA when I bought the property. No one told me. How can I be responsible for something I wasn't aware of?" Patricia gave me a look that made me feel small, insignificant. "That's between you and the seller," she replied coolly. "But now that you're living here, you're obligated to follow the rules and pay your dues." Rules, dues, obligations. The words echoed in my mind, making me dizzy. This couldn't be happening. My dream of solitude, of freedom, was slipping away right in front of me. I wanted to argue, to demand answers, but the roomful of people staring at me silenced my protests. Some looked sympathetic, others indifferent, and a few wore expressions of smug satisfaction, as if they'd seen this play out countless times before. As the meeting dragged on, other homeowners raised their hands to ask questions or share concerns. Most of them revolved around mundane topics: road repairs, landscaping budgets, holiday decorations. To them, this was normal, a routine part of life. But to me, it felt suffocating. Every word spoken reinforced the idea that I no longer controlled my own destiny. Instead, I was expected to conform, to fall in line, to surrender a piece of myself to this faceless organization. By the time the meeting ended, I felt drained. Driving back home, the familiar sights of my land, the wildflowers swaying in the breeze, the stream glistening under the afternoon sun, did little to lift my spirits. For the first time since moving here, I didn't feel at peace. Instead, I felt trapped. That night, unable to sleep, I dug through every document related to my land purchase. Buried deep in the pile was a single sheet titled *** Willow Ridge Community Covenant. ***, it was dense, filled with phrases like shared responsibilities and mandatory association membership. Skimming through it, I found the clause Patricia had mentioned: automatic membership unless objected to within 30 days of closing. 30 days. That window had closed years ago. My stomach churned as realization dawned. This wasn't just a misunderstanding, it was a trap. One I hadn't seen coming, one I didn't know how to escape. And now, I was stuck playing by someone else's rules. The days after the meeting were a blur of frustration and disbelief. I couldn't stop thinking about that piece of paper, the covenant buried in my closing documents, the one I'd unknowingly signed away my freedom with. It haunted me. Every time I looked out at the rolling hills or listened to the stream gurgling in the distance, I felt a pang of anger. This land was supposed to be mine, untouched by anyone else's rules. But now, it seemed like I wasn't truly free after all. I spent hours on the phone, calling lawyers, real estate agents, and even a friend who worked in property law. Each conversation left me more disheartened than the last. One lawyer explained that HOAs had sweeping powers in many areas, especially when covenants were involved. "Once you're in," he said bluntly, "it's almost impossible to get out without a fight." Another suggested I pay the dues just to avoid further trouble, but that felt like giving up, and I wasn't ready to do that yet. Still, The weight of reality pressed down on me. Fighting the HOA would cost money. Money I didn't have. Even if I scraped together enough for legal fees, there was no guarantee I'd win. And while I was busy battling them, they could keep piling on fines, making my life unbearable. The thought of endless letters, escalating penalties, and potential lawsuits loomed over me like a storm cloud. For weeks, I tried ignoring the situation, hoping it would somehow resolve itself. The HOA sent more notices, each one more urgent than the last. They piled up on my kitchen counter, unopened, taunting me every time I walked past. But pretending it wasn't happening didn't make it go away. In fact, things only got worse. One chilly morning, I woke up to find orange spray paint marking my driveway. Blocked access, it read in bold letters. Below it was another notice. *** road access restricted until outstanding dues are paid. ***. My heart raced as I stared at the graffiti-like warning. Without that road, I couldn't reach town, haul supplies, or even check my mailbox. It was as if they'd cut me off from the rest of the world. Furious, I stormed down to Patricia's house. She answered the door wearing a silk robe, looking annoyed but unsurprised. Before I could say anything, she crossed her arms and said, "We can't maintain the roads without funding. If you want access, you'll need to pay your share." "But this is trespassing," I shouted, pointing back toward my driveway. "You can't block my driveway." She smirked, unfazed. "Technically, the road belongs to the HOA. You're using it illegally." Her words hit me like a slap. Illegal? How could walking down my own driveway be illegal? The absurdity of it made my head spin. For years, I'd assumed the road was public property, or at least neutral ground shared by everyone. I never imagined it belonged to the HOA, giving them the power to control who used it. That night, I sat alone in my trailer, staring at the stack of unpaid notices on the table. The room felt smaller than usual, suffocating. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it the faint scent of pine. Normally, that sound would soothe me, remind me why I loved this place so much. But tonight, it only reminded me of what I stood to lose. Desperation crept in. I started researching ways to challenge the HOA, scouring online forums, and reading stories of other homeowners who'd fought similar battles. Some succeeded, but most failed miserably, drained financially and emotionally. A few warnings stood out repeatedly. Don't underestimate their resources, don't let them intimidate you, and above all, don't give up without a fight. But fighting felt impossible. Alone against an organization with deep pockets and decades of experience wielding power, I didn't stand a chance. Or did I? As I flipped through the pages of research late into the night, an idea began to form. Maybe I wasn't completely alone. There had to be others like me. People who resented the HOA's grip on our lives. People tired of being pushed around. If we banded together, maybe we could tip the scales. It was risky, sure, but staying silent felt riskier. For the first time since receiving that ominous letter, I allowed myself a flicker of hope. Perhaps freedom wasn't entirely out of reach. Not if I was willing to fight for it. The blockade on my driveway changed everything. It wasn't just inconvenient. It was humiliating. Every trip to town meant trudging through the woods, climbing over fallen logs, and wading through patches of mud. My boots were caked with dirt, my clothes torn from thorny bushes, and my patience worn thin. Simple errands became epic journeys, and the isolation I once cherished now felt suffocating. Word spread quickly among the neighbors. Some drove by slowly, glancing at the orange-painted warning on my driveway with curious eyes. Others avoided looking at me altogether, pretending not to notice as they passed. A few offered sympathetic smiles or muttered apologies under their breath, but no one stopped to help. It was clear most were too afraid to cross the HOA. They didn't want to end up like me. One evening, as I sat on my porch nursing a cup of tea, I heard footsteps crunching through the leaves. At first, I thought it might be Patricia or one of her cronies coming to deliver another notice. But when I looked up, I saw Sarah, a quiet woman who lived 2 properties down. She hesitated before speaking, her hands fidgeting nervously with the strap of her bag. "I heard what happened with the road," she said softly, almost shyly. "I'm sorry." Her words caught me off guard. In weeks of silence from my so-called neighbors, this simple act of acknowledgement felt monumental. I nodded, inviting her to sit. For a while, we talked about trivial things: the weather, the changing colors of the leaves, the occasional deer sightings. But eventually, the conversation turned serious. Sarah confessed that she'd been dealing with the HOA for years. Her husband had passed away unexpectedly, leaving her struggling to keep up with rising dues and endless demands. "They're ruthless," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "But we're stronger together." Together. The word stuck with me. Until now, I'd faced the HOA alone, convinced that no one else would dare stand up to them. But sitting there with Sarah, I realized how wrong I'd been. There were others like us, people who felt trapped, frustrated, and powerless. If we joined forces, maybe we could push back against the tide. Over the next few days, Sarah and I quietly reached out to other homeowners. We started with those who had shown hints of dissatisfaction. A neighbor who complained about high fees, another who grumbled about unfair fines. Slowly, we built a network of allies, each person bringing new stories of injustice and resentment. Some were hesitant to join, fearing retaliation or legal consequences. Others jumped in eagerly, ready to fight back after years of silent suffering. Our first step was organizing a protest, armed with handmade signs reading ****. "Stop bullying homeowners. ****. Our land. Our rights. ****. And ****. No more fines. ****. We gathered outside the community center during the next HOA meeting. As members filed in, they couldn't ignore us. Dozens of us stood shoulder to shoulder, chanting slogans and holding our ground. Patricia watched from the window, her face pale with barely concealed fury. Inside, tempers flared. The HOA board tried to brush off our concerns, insisting their actions were necessary for maintaining property values and community standards. But we weren't backing down. One by one, homeowners stood up to share their grievances: skyrocketing dues, selective enforcement of rules, threats of lawsuits. Voices rose, emotions spilled over, and for the first time, the HOA's carefully constructed facade began to crack. The protest didn't solve everything overnight, but it marked a turning point. For the first time, I felt a flicker of hope, not just for myself, but for all of us. Maybe we couldn't undo the damage already done, but we could stop it from spreading. Together, we were stronger than any rulebook or penalty fee. And as long as we kept fighting, the HOA wouldn't win without a battle. The protest outside the community center ignited something in all of us, something we hadn't felt in a long time: courage. For years, many of us had lived in fear of the HOA, quietly paying fines and following rules we didn't agree with. But now, standing together, chanting slogans and holding signs high, we realized that power wasn't just theirs to wield. It could be ours too, if we were brave enough to take it. Patricia and her board tried to ignore us at first. They locked themselves inside the community center, pretending the noise outside didn't exist. But as more neighbors joined the protest, their indifference began to crack. Cars slowed down on the road nearby. Curious residents stepped out of their homes, and even some members of the HOA hesitated before entering the building. We weren't invisible anymore. We were impossible to overlook. Inside, tensions ran high. When Sarah and I finally pushed our way into the meeting, legally invited, thanks to a technicality about open-door policies, the room fell silent. Patricia sat at the head of the table, her usual calm demeanor replaced by thinly veiled panic. "This is private property," she snapped, glaring at us. "You have no right to barge in here." "We're not barging," I said firmly, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "We're exercising our rights as homeowners. And believe me, you haven't made that easy." One by one, people stood up to speak. A young couple shared how they'd nearly lost their home because of mounting fines for something as minor as painting their mailbox the wrong shade of gray. An elderly man recounted how the HOA had threatened him with legal action when he couldn't afford rising dues after retirement. Each story added fuel to the fire, turning frustration into determination. By the end of the meeting, even some members of the board looked uneasy, shifting uncomfortably in their seats. But the HOA wasn't ready to back down. In fact, they retaliated harder than ever. The very next morning, I found another notice taped to my door. ***, final warning. Immediate payment required or legal action will follow. ***, this time, they weren't messing around. They filed a lawsuit against me, claiming I owed thousands in unpaid dues and penalties. The weight of it hit me like a ton of bricks. Fighting this would cost money I didn't have, and losing meant risking everything I'd worked so hard to build. Desperate, I called my brother Daniel, who lived in California. He was always the level-headed one, the fixer in the family. When I explained what was happening, he didn't hesitate. "I'm coming over," he said, "and I'll bring reinforcements." True to his word, Daniel arrived a few days later with a top-notch attorney specializing in HOA disputes. Together, we pored over every document, every rulebook, every piece of evidence we could find. What we discovered shocked us. The HOA's finances were a mess. Money funneled into unnecessary projects, inflated budgets, secret meetings where decisions were made without homeowner input. It was corruption masked as community care. Armed with this information, we decided to fight back, not just for me, but for everyone. We organized town hall meetings, inviting anyone willing to listen. At first, attendance was sparse, but as word spread about the HOA's shady practices, more people showed up. Neighbors who had once been too afraid to speak out began sharing their stories, emboldened by the growing movement. Meanwhile, the HOA doubled down, sending letters to other homeowners warning them not to get involved. Some buckled under the pressure, retreating into silence. Others stood firmer than ever, refusing to let fear dictate their choices. Slowly but surely, the tide was turning. As the weeks went by, I started to see glimpses of hope. People exchanged phone numbers, promising to support each other if the HOA came knocking. Strangers became allies, united by a common goal: to reclaim control of our lives. For the first time since moving to Willow Ridge, I felt like part of a real community, one forged not by rules, but by resilience. It wasn't going to be easy. The road ahead promised more battles, more sacrifices, and more uncertainty. But one thing was clear: we weren't backing down. Not now. Not ever. The lawsuit dragged on for months, each day feeling heavier than the last. Courtrooms are strange places, cold, impersonal, and filled with an air of tension that makes your skin prickle. Sitting at the plaintiff's table, I felt like a tiny fish swimming against a current too strong to fight. Patricia and her team of lawyers exuded confidence, their polished suits and rehearsed arguments making them seem untouchable. Meanwhile, Daniel and I sat there clutching stacks of papers, our hearts pounding with every word spoken. Our attorney, Ms. Harper, was sharp and relentless. She spent hours preparing us, drilling us on every detail of the case, and reminding us not to let the HOA intimidate us. "This isn't just about you," she said one evening as we reviewed documents late into the night. "It's about setting a precedent for everyone who's ever been bullied by an HOA." When the trial began, it quickly became clear that both sides had plenty of ammunition. The HOA argued that they were within their rights to enforce the covenant, collect dues, and restrict access to roads. They claimed they existed to protect property values and maintain order. Their witnesses included former board members and even a few homeowners who defended the association's actions, though their testimonies often sounded rehearsed, almost robotic. But then came our turn. One by one, we called witnesses to the stand, homeowners who had suffered under the HOA's iron grip. Sarah spoke about how fines piled up faster than she could pay them, leaving her drowning in debt. Another neighbor described how the HOA had threatened foreclosure over minor infractions, like planting flowers without permission. Each story painted a picture of an organization more interested in control than community. Then Ms. Harper dropped the bombshell. Financial records obtained through subpoena. These documents revealed shocking truths: funds mismanaged, unnecessary expenses approved without homeowner consent, and secret meetings where decisions were made behind closed doors. When Patricia herself took the stand, her calm facade crumbled under cross-examination. Her answers grew defensive, her voice shaky, as Ms. Harper pressed her on discrepancies in the budget reports. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs after each revelation. Even the judge raised an eyebrow more than once, jotting notes furiously. It was exhausting, emotionally draining work, but every small victory gave us hope. Still, the uncertainty lingered. Would all this be enough? Or would the HOA walk away unscathed? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the judge delivered his verdict. His words were measured, deliberate, cutting straight to the heart of the matter. While homeowners associations serve a legitimate purpose, he began, they must operate transparently and fairly. In this case, the Willow Ridge HOA has overstepped its bounds repeatedly, engaging in practices that amount to harassment and extortion. He ruled in our favor, declaring the HOA's actions unlawful and ordering them to dissolve immediately. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Patricia's face turned pale, her lips pressed into a thin line. For the first time, she looked not like the powerful figurehead we come to fear, but like someone who had been caught red-handed. Outside, cheers erupted from the crowd gathered in support. People hugged, cried, and celebrated, a mix of relief and disbelief washing over us all. Months of stress, anger, and sleepless nights melted away in that moment. We had won, not just for ourselves, but for anyone who had ever felt powerless against an HOA. As I stood there, surrounded by neighbors who had become allies, I realized something profound. Justice isn't handed to you, it's fought for. And sometimes, the hardest battles lead to the sweetest victories. The day the judge's ruling came down, it felt like the sun broke through a storm that had been raging for years. The Willow Ridge HOA was officially dissolved. Its power stripped away, its grip on our lives finally broken. For the first time in what felt like forever, I woke up without dread sitting heavy in my chest. Instead, there was lightness, hope, and an overwhelming sense of freedom. That morning, I stepped outside to find the orange spray paint marking my driveway gone. In its place was fresh gravel laid by volunteers from the neighborhood. Someone had even planted wildflowers along the edges. A small gesture, but one that spoke volumes about how far we'd come. As I stood there taking it all in, a car slowed down as it passed. It was Sarah, leaning out her window with a smile. "Welcome back," she said simply before driving off. Later that afternoon, a group of us gathered at the old barn-turned community center, the same place where I'd once felt so out of place. But this time, the atmosphere was different. There were no suits, no clipboards, no rigid rules dictating who could speak or when. Just people sharing stories, laughter, and ideas for the future. We decided then and there to form something new. A voluntary association focused on mutual aid rather than control. No mandatory fees, no oppressive rules, just neighbors helping neighbors. Some suggested organizing workdays to clean up common areas. Others proposed hosting potluck dinners to strengthen bonds. Everyone contributed something, their voices blending together in a way that felt genuine and alive. Over the following weeks, Willow Ridge transformed. Neighbors who had once avoided eye contact now waved hello as they drove past. People shared tools, exchanged gardening tips, and looked out for each other in ways I hadn't seen before. One evening, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of gold and pink, I realized something important. Community isn't built on rules, It's built on trust. Even Patricia and her inner circle began to soften, though it took time. Without the structure of the HOA to hide behind, some of them struggled to adjust. But slowly, they started participating in neighborhood events, contributing in small ways that showed they wanted to be part of the change too. It wasn't perfect, but it didn't have to be. Progress rarely is. Looking back, I can see how much I've grown, not just as a homeowner, but as a person. This fight taught me resilience, courage, and the value of standing up for what's right, even when the odds seem insurmountable. It reminded me that while life will always throw challenges our way, we're stronger when we face them together. Now, when I walk through the woods or sit by the stream, I feel a deeper connection to this land, not because it belongs to me, but because I belong to it. And more importantly, because I belong to a community that fought side by side to protect it. Freedom isn't given, it's earned. And sometimes, the hardest battles lead to the most beautiful victories. Standing here today, surrounded by friends turned family and breathing in the crisp mountain air, I know I wouldn't trade this moment for anything.